Welcome to Year, Make, Model, Money, the auto parts e-commerce podcast by Data Here to There. In each episode, we break down the key trends, challenges, and opportunities in the aftermarket parts industry and e-commerce. From interviews with industry leaders to tips on streamlining your business, we'll give you the knowledge to stay competitive in today's market. It's time to take your business to the next level with Year, Make, Model, Money.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Barry out with Motorhead Digital, and my co-host is Jay Funnell from Data Here to There. We're excited to kick off this episode of Year, Make, Model, Money podcast by Data Here to There. Our guest today is Thomas Beer. Thomas is the CEO of SSF Imported Auto Parts, a Data Here to There distributor partner. Welcome, Thomas.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Hey, Thomas, we're really happy you're here and wanted to get started with a simple question to kind of break the ice is, what was your first car?
My very first car was typical in Germany, an old Beetle, which I got handed down from my sister. But my first vehicle that I bought myself with my first real job was the famous Fiat Uno Turbo, which was called the People's Ferrari in Germany. It was a 100 horsepower turbo, 900 kilo vehicle, ton of fun.
Oh, cool. That sounds like fun. How long did you have that, and what did you progress to next after that hot rod?
Very easy. After I got married, or before marriage, my wife thought that was probably not the most or smartest vehicle for a family. And luckily at the time, what did I do then? Then I bought my absolute dream car, a used Golf GTI, which was in my generation as an 18, 19-year-old, probably more desirable than a Ferrari, a Porsche, anything. If you were 19 years old and you had a GTI in Germany, you were king of the mountain. Absolutely.
Yeah, we had a whole group I knew a couple people that had those here. They're pretty cool little cars.
Yeah.
What really got you interested in the automotive world when you first got started, especially the European EOM parts and things like that?
Well, I'm probably a real exception in the industry because I'm a late starter, or coming in from the sidelines. I was always a big car guy, but my career in Germany started after college. I did a trainee program at Lufthansa, German Airlines, and then I was in the travel industry, and then in a unique company that basically managed the entire paper flow for the travel industry. So it was kind of a little odd supply chain business, but kind of a unique little monopoly, very successful. And my wife, I met my wife on vacation in the US. We lived in Germany for 8 years together. And I didn't get into the automotive side until I was 40 when I lived in LA.
Oh, okay. Did you go right into the European EOM, or did you work in another space, other segments of the industry?
Life sometimes, it's odd circumstances. I met the owner of Meile, or Wolf Gärtner at the time. Wolf Gärtner was the basically the the hotbed in the 70s for all the European first grain export houses and then the importers on the US side. Okay. So it's kind of a funny story. If you look at Worldpac, IMC, and SSF, all leaders came out of Wolf Gärtner in Hamburg. They're all called Hans Wolf from Worldpac, Hans Kopecky at SSF, and Hans Hedderer at IMC. And I got to know with Karl Gärtner, and I was German, and they needed a German because they little English language issues and cultural issues, and that's how I became CEO at IMC in 2004 without any experience background in the automotive parts world whatsoever. I survived several years by just asking questions because I had not much to offer except, let's say, putting different answers together from different people and trying to figure out what might probably be the best way to go forward.
But you're a fast learner, right? So you took and went with it, right? You got to dig
I
into
hope
that
so.
stuff. Well, I'm hoping
Yeah.
especially when you're in that situation where you have to learn, right?
Well,
So,
I'd say this. I say this, Barry. Maybe one thing that was a little different than most of our colleagues, parts distributors, where the parts knowledge, even, talk 15, 20 years ago when, people tried to impress each other by rattling off part numbers by heart. And knowing, out knowing each other into the leadership level. And I never had that. And I never tried to compete on that because I knew I have absolutely no, how do you say, level of competition here. But leaving the parts team do their job and, let's say, looking at the bigger managing of the environment and the team and the customer base maybe helped to have a little different approach. Yeah.
right. Well, and that's what leadership's all about, right? Thinking about the overall picture. How did you end up in your position there at SSF?
It really was. They needed a new CEO. I met the Hans Hederer, who really turned IMC into what it was over 30-year period, and he retired. And then I met him, and he said, "Oh, someone like you, could fit well here." But they just had hired a gentleman from Germany to replace him. And then I run into Hans 6 months later and like, "Oh, how things are going? How's the new guy?" He says, "Lucky I meet you." Or we had to send him home. It didn't work out. Can we have another conversation? And that's how this whole thing took off. And I really started as a CEO. It was a little scary, and I definitely was out of my league. And for at least several months, I'm like, hopefully they don't figure out that I don't know anything here. And then it got better.
Well, awesome.
Asking the right questions along the way.
Did you ever envision yourself in that level at some point in your career, whether it be at SSF or someplace else? Or did it evolve, I guess?
It's a really good question. Envision, I'm not so sure, but I had a really great start at Lufthansa. I did my trainee program and then became relatively quickly, because of a, let's say, fortunate choice, when Germany opened up and we were allowed to fly into Berlin and East Germany, because that was blocked for Lufthansa. Only the Allied Airlines, British Airways, and Pan Am and Air France could do that. And then I was in that area and nobody had experience with that. So I got it, let's say, relatively, if you translate it, I was kind of a director level very early on. But after I got married and I realized eventually we may move back to the States, or move to the States, LA, where my wife grew up, I left Lufthansa and I had a job during my college times in executive search, which was completely new in Germany at the time. Headhunting was like, nobody knew what that was. And through that, I had a good friend, and he got me into the interview process as a CEO of a tour operator, which belonged to a company comparable to Costco. We did specialty tours for specialty groups. And this is how I became my first CEO job. And from that, I got the next job in that distribution company, was also a CEO job. This was another funny one. They didn't really tell me why they hired me. The two owners, very successful. I thought, why do they need another CEO? But, the pay was good and everything was attractive. Well, they wanted to sell the company and they needed the future leadership to present. So we went into a private equity deal pretty quickly. Very successful, fortunately. And then after we sold it twice. And that's when I moved to the States in 2001.
Gotcha. So you
So
have
I kind of fell from one CEO job to the next.
yes, you had the experience way before you got into
Wasn't really that
SSF,
I
right?
envisioned that. It just, I was kind of you know, happened in succession.
Nice. That's pretty cool. Um, the tell us about how you would say the company, the core mission of SSF. Really want to get into the journey of SSF and where they evolved from and what their specialty is, things like that in the parts market.
Yeah, love to. I mean, one kind of foundational thinking that I developed during IMC when I got there. IMC used to be really the leading European parts distributor, and I think IMC made one critical, let's say, wrong turn when they added Asian parts in mid 90s or late 90s. And it was interesting. I had a lot of conversations with Hans Sederer, who admitted that was his one critical mistake he ever made, because European is a very specialty niche. And if you're very good at that, it's very hard to catch because it's only 7% of the car park. We tend to forget that. Therefore, all the big domestic WDs and even the solid, strong, mid-sized family-operated businesses are very good at what they're doing. In the 93% Asian and domestic, or domestic and Asian, why waste your resources for that 7% very different supply chain, cataloging, sales, customer base? It's a lot of effort for little gain. If you flip it around, if you're really good as a European specialist in that niche, why should you try to compete in a world where there's a huge market, huge players that have 3 generation plus experience? They're very good at that. They have very strong relations. And you're the total beginner. I mean, you spend all your resources to hopefully in 5 or 10 years become lower middle class, but you have no qualm to compete with the real strong players on the domestic side. And that's why when I left IMC after 7 years, and together with WM out of Germany, the largest WD there and number 3 in Europe, I always had my eyes on SSF. Even during IMC times, I was hoping we might be able to maybe buy them because I knew about the strength in the foundational product and catalog side. It was just not the strongest sales and marketing organization, but in what they did, they were always the best in our industry. And so when we finally were able to buy it from the founders, it was clear we're not going to leave that European focus under no circumstances. I mean, I get asked once a month or sometimes once a week, oh, why don't you do the same thing? And like, that would be the worst mistake you can do.
Well, and when you say the 7% of the market, is that OEM parts, aftermarket, both?
No, it's the VIO. I mean, I think we're now at 7.6%. We were out of the 288 million vehicles, light vehicles in the US, 23.2 million are Europeans. That's the fact,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So over the years, have you seen a big shift on how people buy and sell European auto parts? Have you seen a change or has it stayed steady? What are you seeing there?
It's a very good question, Barry. When I got into the industry and, with an import specialist at the time, I mean, within probably a week, I was 100% convinced that this segmentation between domestic, Asian, and European was so a thing of the past and probably months, worst case, years away from being disappearing because it doesn't seem to make sense. And it's funny that most even key industry players, even in Germany, honestly, with the big manufacturers, they think the same way. But today, what is that, 21, 22 years later, I'd say it has only grown. And it took me a long time to develop my own understanding of that. And this is as follows. I believe the true difference between the US and the European automotive industry is actually driven out of the supplier base. And with that, what I mean is the big innovations in automotive in Europe are actually have always come from the suppliers. I mean, the Bosches of the world, the ZFs of this world, the Contis of this world, ABS, airbags, air suspension. I mean, modern suspension systems. This is all being developed by the parts manufacturers and then introduced to the car manufacturers, who are brilliant people on all ends, no doubt. But I don't think you have that in the US. There are no major innovators on the parts sides. And if you look at the way cars, and now we don't even have passenger cars built in the US anymore, we only have trucks and pickups, or SUVs and pickups. I think it's because that innovative source is missing. And if you take this to the way we sell parts, we as Europeans, we're selling, I mean, as SSF, with our key focus is on OEM, the original part that's in the car, that keeps the car in the same functionality, same reliability, and it's also key, what we believe, in retaining the asset value. It's the same thing, whatever you have. Any type of, let's say, top technology, you cannot put aftermarket parts in it because, they may work, but they may also not work. And then you destroy the integrity of the product. And that is the difference. In the US, the domestic world doesn't even know what an OE number is. They don't have that. It's a part. It's a manufacturer part number. OE number doesn't exist, which is everything that the European mindset is wrapped or built around.
We have a lot of being part of SEMA myself, and in one of the subcommittees for ARMO, the restoration side. Even the build side, there's a lot of aftermarket parts. There's a lot of us. I know people in the industry that are developing parts because they saw a need, whether it's a old pickup truck or something that came off the assembly line 6 months ago, right? There's a lot of outside companies that are even. There's a lot of people, mom and pop shops that are doing builds and restorations and actually developing parts that they figured a better way to do it.
Right.
They're not mass market, of course, right? They'd love them to be, but that's a long game to get into that. But it's just different here, going back to, especially after World War II, where we were all just like tinkering, and I think that's where. But they are all aftermarket, like you said. There are. I have a 4-wheel drive pickup truck. I didn't have it a week. I put a 3-inch lift on it and big tires. It did affect the ADAS. But it's not that big a deal for that vehicle. But I hear what you're saying. It's just a different thing. And there are times where innovations that they do, that guys I'm talking about do trickle up to the manufacturer sometime, but you see it in a model down the road. I mean, we've been telling you to do that for years. We were doing it over here before the manufacturer got to it. We've seen that kind of stuff.
Well, I think these are really complex topics, I think. Take, for example, the fact, if you build a successful pickup truck, let's say the most common thing, like a Ford F-150, well, you don't need to be overly innovative. People like it the way it is. The way it's done, it's coming at an incredibly, unbelievably cheap price point. If you think for what it is, the 6.2 liter 8-cylinder engine, this is Where do you get 8-cylinder big volume engines anywhere else for nothing? I mean, they're normally super luxury vehicles. But they're using the same parts over 4 or 5 iterations and generations, a little different in the outside, a little here, a little there. But under the hood and suspension and braking systems are barely changed over a long, long period of time. It's fine if the customer base likes that. But I think if you look at the Europeans and American and the Japanese and now the Koreans, to be able to compete in the US or globally, they had to come up with, very creative, different ideas. Do you see any Ford F-150s being sold in major numbers outside of the US? Maybe Canada? Zero in Europe? Zero in Asia? A little bit in South America. It's if you have such a big market and you develop for that market, perfect. If you're coming from a small country and you need to build something for a global market, you have to be more innovative.
So when you're saying innovative, it sounds like what you're referring to is the finding a market or a new market and developing products for it, as opposed to taking an existing, like for example, F-150 and force that into a new market.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is a curiosity question for me, as far as, with all the talk of tariffs and everything, with the Ford F-150, for example, is it not sold in other countries because the people that live there don't want to buy it, or it's not allowed into the country, or there's limits or things like that? It's just more of a curiosity question.
It's an interesting question. Yeah. I don't know why the Europeans really did the dumbest thing of putting the 25% tariff on pickups, because they don't, do they need to protect? Nobody can drive those because of 2 reasons. One, they're far too large. You can't get into a single parking spot nor into a single public parking garage. And the fuel is far more expensive in Europe. Right. So if you have a vehicle that has 14, 15 miles per hour per gallon, nobody's going to buy that. The Europeans, if you go to most countries, they all driving small cars. In Germany, actually, the SUVs started to do better these days. But there was a funny discussion between a government official and the Japanese prime minister, complaining that the Japanese don't drive American cars. And then was the question, do you build any cars with a right-hand steering wheel? Because the Japanese drive on the other side, same like the British.
Exactly. So it sounds
it
like
has nothing to do. It's just a product that doesn't fit for the market.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. I was just curious, as far as the future and everything in current times. What is SSF? How do they balance the legacy of working with garages and shops, and then now the whole advent of e-commerce and selling online and things like that? How do you balance that? Does it are you just shifting, or you do both? How does that work?
Yeah, it's another great question. It's one of the the things we developed over a long period of time, and really took us a while to find our groove, if you want to put it this way. But the answer is actually pretty simple. There's a strong demand on both channels. For us, the do it for me, meaning our installer business, will always be the core business, the priority business. Because also that's where we get all the feedback. The shops tell us what we need to do, and we need to be, our key quality is not being, let's say, smarter than the shops or figuring out what they should need. We're really in a business where you have to be good listeners, because if you listen well and you do exactly what the shops ask you to do, you do very well. If you outsmart them, you bring something they don't care, and they won't buy from you. But the reason why why we're more engaged, I think, into the online retail side than some of our competitors is simply it allows us to use our infrastructure, meaning all our warehouses, for a bigger volume, and therefore bringing down the cost of operation down for both channels. So if we would do only online retail, all the warehousing that we have would have to be financed through that. If we would have only installer business, all our delivery warehouses would only have installer volume. This way, our DCs are very, have a very strong, our distribution centers a very big load, driven from the shipping business, from the shipping side, and that brings down the cost for the other side of the business as well. So we basically, you may say, we subsidize each other through the volume.
So within that, do you find that an account will stick to like the brick and mortar, or stick to online, or is there maybe a hybrid where they're trying both?
Obviously, we have, I would say, on our online retail side, anyone who does some or more European parts distribution through online retail most likely buys something from us. Some do everything, some do a lot, and some do a little, but they all pretty much work with us. And we're watching, obviously what we see on online retail business that's going to shops. And that percentage from our observation is very steady over the years. You would think it'll increase over time, but it's insignificant, I would say. And the reason at the end of the day, I believe, is, in our delivery markets, we delivered up to 12 times a day. For the shop, a shop that bills his parts supply on a next day shipping does not work. And next day shipping on the online retail side is also, obviously we all ship the most efficient or commercially attractive way, which means, it could be one day, it could be 2 days, it could come in the morning, come in the afternoon. Shops that buy from us outside our delivery areas, everything is next day AM, because they need to be assured that the part arrives by 10 so they can plan the rest of the day. If they don't know when the parts come, they can schedule either the customer for drop off and pickup, but also their own team, and most importantly, their lifts. You put something on the lift and the part doesn't come for a day, the lift is blocked. That's lost a revenue guaranteed. So yes, do shops find parts, some obscure parts on eBay or so that they can't find anywhere else? Absolutely. Do they find some big ticket item somewhere cheaper? Happens all the time. But this is a specific percentage of the business that I don't think will change much.
Well, with the advent of online parts and everything, right, those shops also have another outlet with, especially partnering with Data Here to There with the Slingshot app, to connect to their store and sell your parts on their website with, never seeing that customer, or having them buy it and then bring it in and install it, right?
Right.
Which is something they didn't have before e-commerce, right? They just, hope people show up at the door, right? By doing print ads and radio and TV and stuff like that. So that adds another level. We actually have a gentleman in Texas we're talking about too right now that does all your European. So we're looking to partner with Data Here to There for them, because they have a shop now. They have, bays
Right.
and everything.
No, and that's exactly why we really embraced that relationship. Our strategy is very simple. Our strength is sourcing, finding the part somewhere in the world, sourcing it, importing it, and basically distributing it. we are strong on the part side. When it comes to the customer side, the last thing we would want to do is control any kind of distribution, because there aren't many of us. De facto, it's very, very, very few who offer a complete European OEM program the way we do. So anyone who helps us sell it, we're happy with. The more parts we move through our system, that's all really we care about. We don't need, the last thing we want is any whatever. We don't sell here, we don't sell there, or, whatever. We are in a closed up system. No, we have something that's the market needs, and the more channels and partners help us to sell it, everybody's welcome. Seriously.
Oh, okay. So in that, I've always known SSF as a B2B, or like selling to businesses. But do you sell direct to customer at all, or?
Well, we don't, but we sell to all kinds of online retail channels, partners. We're not good at it, and it's something. Why should we try to do this when there are so many great online retailers and small shops? I mean, this is real innovation and creativity. How people have no inventory, nothing, but they figure out a way to promote parts through their channels, and if they sell ours, wonderful for everybody.
You've had a relationship with Data Here to There for a while with Jay and Stephanie Matt Fletcher back in San Francisco. And since then, they've grown a number of mutual clients together. How using the Slingshot Automotive app, okay? So how, in your perspective, how has that helped your relationship? And how has it evolved?
Well, it's I think the great part is the technological barriers in these partnerships are becoming quickly smaller and smaller. We all know the headaches of trying to connect systems and data flowing back and forth and order confirmations and shipping tracking numbers. This is all becoming ever more standardized. And I think, on the retail online, on the parts retail side, it's an interesting phenomenon. You see very, very, very few online retailers able to manage and handle inventory. I think the market has really matured in the sense that on the European side, seriously, there are 3 players left who have the size and the horsepower to manage their own inventory. They still need, or I think intelligently enough, decide, what, I do the volume and the more obscure parts I can buy from one of the distributors like us. But 95 in terms of quantity players in the market will never manage their own inventory, because it's A, capital, B, vendor relations, C, volume, and D, managing that whole people, technology, this incredible headache, and capital, most importantly, in our business. So everyone who wants to get in, who wants to grow, uses someone who has the parts and is willing to do the drop shipping for them. So I think that is a different type of company than someone who engages in the complexities of managing inventory. And that's why these companies, that you work with, of 10 who start, 2 will make it, and the other 8 will realize, oh, this is complicated and there's a lot of experienced people here. I probably won't be here for all too long. But it drives an enormous chance for innovative players, different marketing channels, approaches, whatever they figure out, And I think they're here to stay. And I think that they're here to remain strong, viable competitors to the ones who, again, manage their own inventory.
When you're mentioning there about the creativity and innovation in terms of the marketing, so we have a lot of dealers who use our apps to sell, and every store is different. So, and they might be using Instagram or YouTube
Right.
or ways to promote. They'll have videos and pictures of their shop. It's really all about that personalization and setting themselves apart. And a lot of them have started in aftermarket, and I think it's a beautiful fit to bring on SSF on the OEM parts as
Mhm.
well. So not only can you buy the aftermarket part, you can buy the OEM parts at the same time. And so I think that's a really good fit going forward, and how we reach these dealers.
Well, even for us, we're a marketing agency. We're digital marketing. We build websites, do a lot of digital marketing. And one of the biggest struggles that we always had was customers that came before we met Data Here to There back in 2021 was, a customer wants to sell all these parts online. I says, well, do you have the time to just manually enter all that data and find a distributor and do all that work and or even the place to inventory certain things, right? And it's made our life a lot easier. We still build some e-commerce sites with limited number of parts that are all manually entered, and that's still a nightmare with just that. And then you add in shipping and inventory and all that. It's just so the Slingshot Automotive app and connecting with certain distributors, especially on the European side with you guys, it's huge. It makes life so much easier for it. It makes the cost of entry is a lot lower to get into also selling online when you have bays to work on cars as well.
No, I agree. And I think it's a great opportunity for, also people with a specialty product in something, let's say, performance, SEMA world, whatever. But you sell an advanced set of brakes, well, you still need a brake sensor, or whatever complex jobs, but you need the ordinary oil filter. And if you can just simply add to your specialty niche product all the things around that you need to keep the car, operating, we're more than happy to be that partner who fills in that gap. Absolutely.
Cool. Have you seen what businesses or merchants have you really seen thrive with partnering with you to sell your products? Is there a specific niche you've seen do better than others?
Whew. I mean, I'd say this. I think the constant, yes, there's a clear answer to that on both sides, on the installer side and on the online retail side. The more specialized, the more successful, very clearly. So we see, I mean, we honestly didn't really plan for that, but we're, I think, reasonably fortunate that on the installer world, for example, it's becoming every year more evident that the shops that are focused on one or two car lines are doing the best. And it's logic, because I mean, if you have a whatever $50,000-$60,000 BMW, Mercedes, or something, I mean, do you really want to drop it off somewhere where you see anything from any whatever domestic Korean young old car there that you think, does he guy really knows exactly what to do with my 2020 whatever 5 Series BMW? Or you have something where there's nothing but BMWs in front of the door. Or, I mean, we have a couple of specialized Land Rover shops. I mean, you go there are half of the cars are Range Rovers and half of the cars are Land Rovers. You know that your Range Rover is in the best hands over there. You take it somewhere else where there's not one Range Rover in front of the shop. You really want to leave your car there? Probably not.
Yeah, it's becoming, even in the U.S. market, where a shop's niche down. There's shops that work on just Chrysler products or Mopars,
Yeah.
would say,
Right.
or Chevys or Corvettes. Niching down definitely helps the business, helps you focus, be the expert at that. And then it also helps attract customers, right? Because they're seeing that, hey, they know my vehicle really well, right?
Yeah. Well,
And
it's
the
really
same
good.
is online retail. The guys are really specialized on certain car lines or certain product categories. They do well, generally.
It's good to hear this conversation and have it public, because we do have dealers who will come to us and ask that same question. Should I just sell everything? So, for example, let's take the whole SSF catalog and do a buckshot approach, and it's rarely successful. I think the reasons that you gave, Thomas, are really solid. Would you trust your Range Rover parts request to somebody that's selling things for like every possible vehicle?
Right.
And it helps. It also helps them narrow and focus the marketing too. They can get those keywords. They can get those requests for part numbers even that are more specific. So I think that's a really important point.
I mean, you wouldn't go to to an orthopedist if you want your eyes fixed. I mean, they're both doctors, but
Yeah, they're specialized in their own specific space.
That's what it is. Yeah.
There's a lot of shared ground between SSF and Data Here to There. Do you see opportunities in the future, whether digital tools, partnerships, how we serve the niche, how we can manage that and expand it even, right?
Absolutely. And I think the biggest opportunity and what we're most excited about actually that's part of the reason why we changed our entire IT over the last 3 years to get to that flexibility, is what we think or what we call vendor dropship. So we're dropshipping, for the last, 25 years for others, and we never had anyone dropship a part on our behalf, mainly because of technology. But the way we look at SSF in the future is we see ourselves a little bit like the European parts marketplace, out of which some we carry, the things that we're specialized in and we have the relations, but we don't need to carry, and we cannot carry everything. We have limited of space, and parts need to move a certain amount to be economically viable for us. But could we, with the right integration, which again becomes ever easier today, add specialty suppliers for certain vehicles, for historic vehicles, for certain product categories that we don't necessarily carry, but we could make available through our platform. And this way, it would be available to all our partners the same way. If we ship it out of our warehouse or someone else ships it out of their warehouse, for the retail customer, that doesn't make any difference if the supply chain is well managed.
In the end, that helps Data Here to There's customers, because you're partnering with other companies so you can expand your product catalog without having that huge inventory, as long as that partner is, meets all the requirements for drop shipping and everything like that, and having that inventory. So when somebody buys it online, it's available and it gets shipped in a timely manner, right?
That's exactly it. And it would be, obviously dramatically easier for Jay's customers to come to one place, where there's a long menu list where you say, this is what I want to sell, this is what I sell, this is what I want to sell. And it's one business relation, and it's coming all through our catalog. And the same, on a small specialty parts manufacturer or supplier, wherever they may be, they probably will never find Jay's customer. They find each other, nor do they want to build, an extra data integration and, all back and forth and commercial relationship if this could come through us.
Yeah, and also too, speaking about the catalog, that is a core strength with the SSF integration, is that you guys have pictures for everything. You have fitment, you have the titles, descriptions. Like, so when we get into selling online, being able to see it is a huge requirement. A lot of people want to see, and so you've got pictures of the bolts, the gaskets, the sensor, all of the major parts. So I can see how you guys have been getting this ready and making it ready for like online sales, and our dealers do appreciate that. So it's a combination, I think, of those factors that make SSF a great partner.
A couple of questions about your vision, leadership type things. As a CEO, what's your top focus right now for SSF?
Good question. So we had the last 3 years was really our IT. We were on an old ERP infrastructure, IBMI world. Unfortunately, hard and software, all one proprietary system that, in a way, a little bit, we ran around the system, or the system ran us, however you want to call it. Now we can do it ourselves, fortunately, and it's such a relief, to have a modern cloud-based standard infrastructure with standard processes. We all think, automotive we're so unique and so different, which is total nonsense. If we wouldn't have cores, we would be the same as everybody else, I'd say. But no, what we're doing now, on the one hand, is we're really expanding our footprint to be in the installer world, in other key markets that we're not in. And if you look at where are the big VIO numbers, you can anticipate where this will be, because we want to be an alternative to our larger competitors, for our suppliers. We cannot be strong in the West Coast and in the Southeast to be a real alternative. You need to be in all the key markets that they care about. On the other side, it is exactly what we talked about. It's that kind of developing of being more of a platform than a distributor. Meaning, we want to make the SSF infrastructure available to a much broader range of suppliers to reach the European customer base on the do-it-for-me side, through the shops, through us, as well as on the online retail side, through all partners like yourself.
So out of all of that, what are you most excited about for the future for SSF?
The really fun part for us is we're becoming, partially of our own doing, but I think mainly by the doing of our colleagues' industry, a little bit of a niche of one, in the sense that, our key competitors are all makes or models, obviously. And since they grew from the 7% in the 100% market, you also know where the big growth potential for them is. And since they're all private equity owned, and big private equity, I think they're thinking like Wall Street, and Wall Street has standards how they look at the automotive parts business in terms of having their own branding, having high margins. That is all not what we do, which is branded names, European OE, which is not the super high margins. We're fine with that. We have a very, very long view. We're family owned, third generation, the Müller family in Germany. Very, very successful, very down to earth. And they look at business really as a family affair, which is wonderful. And
oh, that's cool.
So we have really the long view. We know automotive repair will not change dramatically going forward. And even with the electrification, if and when and how it comes, the internal combustion engines or vehicles that will remain on the road will obviously be much more European than it would be Toyotas and, Chryslers and stuff like that. So I think when people start trying to keep their BMWs and their Porsches and their Mercedes alive, the competition will much faster disappear than the demand. We're still selling a lot of Volvo Saab parts today. Surprisingly, the last Saab was built in December 2011.
Are you really? Wow.
Yeah.
So
It's not that the
keeping
car
them
park
going.
isn't dropping, but there's no competition anymore.
Right. What's the biggest challenge you see exist in the European part segment within North America? I'm sure there's some.
Well, I'd say, traditionally, I wouldn't say, is it a big challenge? The problem is the Germans the Europeans have a hard time understanding, again, coming back to this really silly 7% problem. They are world market leaders in what they do, and they have an overwhelming market share in Europe and in Asia. And then they look towards the US and say, well, why do we only have whatever 2% of the brake business, where the famous ATE or Continental calls himself the largest brake systems manufacturer in the world? Probably true, but who knows Continental or ATE for brakes in the US? Nobody. And that won't change because they haven't grown up in the domestic vehicle world. That's sometimes a little hard for them to accept that the largest market in the world with the smallest market share for the Europeans. But looking at the challenges going forward, let's say forget tariffs and stuff like that. Currently, I think the biggest risk will be when currently the factories, the parts manufacturers from the suppliers we work mostly with, obviously produce on the same line for OE and the aftermarket. And what's the ratio? Call it 80-20 plus minus, somewhere there. Some do more, some do less. What happens if they don't do 80% for new car production anymore on engine parts? What happens with the 20% aftermarket? You can't run a factory if the 80% reduces by half, then you have 40 plus 20, now you have 60% capacity load. What do you do with that factory? That is going to be an interesting challenge. I'm sure a lot of things will move around and whatever being picked up by whatever private equity, consolidations to factories, but making sure that no part falls through the cracks, that's not going to be easy. I think what also will be important, and I think great chance domestically, is a different look on remanufacturing, recycling, refurbishing, because call of cars from the 70s, 80s, and soon from the 90s, these parts are not being made anymore, point blank. So the only way to keep them coming is if you remake them, or you take the existing part and fix it. Right.
And one of the biggest problems with newer cars now is they're not made to be fixed, right? They're made to be, a lot of stuff is made to be replaced. So 20, 30 years from now, what do? You can't fix it because of the way it's manufactured, right? This is more of a outside of work. What are you passionate about? How do you wind down?
Well, I'm, for a very, very long time, since my youth, I'm a pretty dedicated golfer. So that creates enough headache besides the parts business. But it takes all the thinking about the parts business away, and you're stuck with, trying to hit the ball where it should go. I do on and off lately a lot of yoga again, which, I used to run, but then eventually the bones hurt. And that helps me a lot. It's a great way to relax and stay limber, which if you're over 60, is helping a lot to at least feel not that old.
No, I know how you feel.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then I'm married for 32 years. Fortunately, very happy, and have 4 boys that are all grown, which is also a lot of fun. So, no, all good. It's a good combination.
Oh, awesome.
Excellent.
Well, everyone, thanks for joining us today on Your Make Model Money. Thomas, thanks for joining us. Tell people how people can reach out to you if they want to connect, LinkedIn, what's your website, things like that.
Yeah, everything. We're with SSF on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on Instagram, not on Twitter, and tbeer at ssfautoparts.com. Always happy and excited to discuss and find input from the outside. Again, what I preach to our team from day one, and probably everybody's bored to hear it, but our number one skill set in our industry, I believe, is listening, because we have a lot of complicated things in what we do, but we don't have to invent software or pharmaceuticals or whatever new technology, but we need to deliver what the customer really wants. And for that, you need to keep your ears at the customer and make sure that the information really flows through the entire information organization. If we sit there and, as a management team and imagine what the world should look like, we're bound to make stupid decisions.
Yeah, I hear you on the listening side. It can be quite humbling.
Yeah.
You have dealers that will say, "Wait, this should work this way," and
yeah, exactly. Yeah, a day out in the field with shops, and you always feel like, oh my god,
yeah, it's but that's
recalibrate.
And when you listen and you adapt and better understand the problems they're going through, I think everybody wins.
Yeah.
Join our next episode of the Year, Make, Model, Money podcast, the DH2T Auto Parts podcast, where we'll interview another mover and shaker in the automotive parts industry and give your business the boost it needs to succeed in the online world.